When you look out at a rugged Alaskan landscape, especially in the middle of winter, it looks completely still, frozen.
Yeah, like someone just hit the pause button on nature.
Exactly. Like nothing is happening at all. But if you were to zoom in, like past the snowdrifts and the ice, you wouldn't find stillness. Not at all.
No, you'd find a billion tiny, complex survival machines just working frantically.
Right. Constantly adjusting, just trying to make it to the next day. And to figure out how this living machinery survives, you can't just read an instruction manual.
You really can't. You have to look at the parts.
Which is exactly what we're doing today. Welcome to our deep dive. Whether you're a student, a parent, a teacher, or a school administrator, we are so glad you're tuning in.
Definitely.
Today, we are opening the hood on the territory of the 7th grade life science curriculum, specifically the Bioforge framework known as MS-LS1, Organisms, Cells, Systems, and Survival.
Such a fascinating framework.
It really is. And we are taking the central student-facing question: how are living things built, and how do their parts work together to keep an organism alive? And we're going to explore the mechanics behind it. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
If we treat biological life like, reverse engineering, a highly complex survival machine, we have to look past the macroscopic chassis, the outside. We have to look at the gears.
Right, we have to shift our perspective entirely. Because that macroscopic stillness we talked about, it hides microscopic chaos.
Chaos is a good word for it.
Yeah, and knowledge is most valuable when you can connect it to real-world survival. And survival, well, it begins at the absolute smallest functioning unit of life.
Yeah.
The cell.
The ultimate building block.
Exactly. This framework establishes that all living things are made of cells. Whether they are single-celled organisms, operating completely independently, or multicellular organisms relying on trillions of interacting units.
Right.
But a cell is not just a solid static block. I think that's a common misconception. It's actually a dynamic, open system.
Meaning it interacts with its environment.
Yes, it requires a constant exchange of energy and matter. So you have organelles inside, like mitochondria, acting as metabolic engines. They take in glucose and oxygen to generate usable chemical energy.
Like tiny power plants.
Exactly. And you have the cell membrane, which operates as this highly selective biological boundary. It actively regulates the traffic of nutrients coming in and waste going out.
And the physical structure of those boundaries completely dictates how an organism survives, right?
Sure.
Especially when you drop it into an extreme environment like the Alaskan tundra.
Oh, absolutely. Structure is everything.
Take a Sitka spruce tree versus an animal. A spruce needle's cells are wrapped in this rigid outer box made of cellulose, the cell wall.
Right, the plant cell wall.
Yeah, and that structure is what allows a tree to stand hundreds of feet tall without a skeletal system. But animal cells, they lack that wall. They just have the flexible lipid membrane.
And that structural difference. It is quite literally a matter of life and death when temperatures plummet in Alaska. Well, consider tundra lichen. Specifically, the genus Cladonia, this kind of mossy-looking organism. These things endure brutal, repeated freeze-thaw cycles.
Right, freezing and unfreezing constantly.
Yeah. And we know that when water freezes, it expands.
Yeah.
Right? It forms these jagged ice crystals.
Ouch.
Yeah, exactly. Inside a flexible animal cell, those expanding crystals act like microscopic blades. They physically tear the lipid membrane apart from the inside out.
So the cell just bursts.
The cell is destroyed, yes.
But the lichen doesn't rupture.
It doesn't. And it's all because of that rigid cellulose wall you mentioned. The thick cellular wall acts as a physical constraint.
So it pushes back.
Exactly. As the water inside begins to freeze and expand, the structural integrity of the wall exerts an opposing mechanical pressure. It prevents the flexible membrane from stretching to the point of structural failure.
Wow.
So the physical architecture of the cell directly causes the survival effect.
Okay, hang on. I'm stuck on something here.
Sure, what is it?
If these cells are such perfectly engineered survival machines on their own, right? And they possess all these internal mechanisms to handle energy and environmental stress.
Right.
Why don't we see giant single-celled organisms? Like, why isn't there a giant single-celled salmon swimming upstream?
That is such a great question.
Why did life bother evolving to require billions of cells working together if one cell is so good at it?
What's fascinating here is that the answer isn't actually biological, it's pure geometry.
Wait, really?
Math.
Yeah.
Math, it comes down to a constraint known as the surface area to volume ratio. So let's run a quick thought experiment.
Right.
Imagine a cell as a microscopic cube. If you double the width of that cube, Its surface area, meaning the outer membrane, increases quadratically, but its internal volume increases cubically.
Oh, I see. Meaning the metabolic engine room inside the cell is growing much, much faster than the shipping doors on the outside.
That is a great way to put it. That is the mechanical trap. The internal volume dictates how much nutrient supply the cell needs to survive and how much toxic waste it produces.
Right. The bigger the factory, the more supplies it needs.
Exactly. And the surface area dictates how fast those materials can physically cross the boundary. So if a cell grows too large, the internal mass demands massive amounts of glucose and oxygen.
But the shipping doors are too small.
Yes. The relatively small outer membrane simply doesn't have the physical real estate to transport those molecules fast enough. A massive traffic jam occurs at the membrane.
So it just shuts down.
The cell would either suffocate, starve, or poison itself with its own trapped waste. Mathematics strictly forbids a cell from growing infinitely large.
That is wild. So the only mathematical workaround to build, say, 1,000-pound moose is teaming up.
Exactly.
You can't make the individual blocks bigger, so you just have to use more blocks, which means those cells have to specialize, right? They scale up into a hierarchy.
Yes, the biological hierarchy.
Cells form tissues, tissues fold together to form organs, and then organs integrate into body systems.
And this introduces, honestly, the most vital concept in life science: homeostasis.
Because these specialized systems can't just operate on their own.
No, they cannot operate in isolation. And homeostasis is often misunderstood as this static state of calm, like a perfectly balanced scale.
But it's not.
It's not at all. It is a frantic, continuous process of chemical and electrical communication between body systems, all just to maintain internal stability against a chaotic outside world.
Okay, let's ground this in a real-world scenario. Think about a Pacific salmon fighting its way upstream against a roaring Alaskan river current.
Classic example.
The muscular system is just burning through energy to drive the tail, right? But the muscle tissue can't gather its own oxygen.
Right, it relies on other systems.
So as oxygen levels in the muscle drop, chemosensors in the blood vessels detect the rising carbon dioxide, and then the nervous system processes that chemical trigger and fires an electrical impulse to the respiratory system, the gills, forcing them to work faster.
Exactly. The respiratory system then pulls more dissolved oxygen from the river water. But again, that oxygen is useless if it just stays at the gills.
It's got to move.
Right. So the nervous system simultaneously signals the circulatory system, increasing the heart rate to actively pump that newly oxygenated blood back to the muscle tissues.
It's an entire communication loop.
It has to be. If any one of those communication lines fails, the salmon gets swept downstream.
It's less like a traditional factory and more like like a modern smart grid city.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Yeah, you don't just generate power blindly. The city relies on real-time data from sensors on every street. So if there's a surge in demand in the industrial district, say, the muscles, the grid, dynamically reroutes power and resources from other sectors to prevent a blackout.
That's perfect. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, we can observe what happens when a localized failure actually hits that grid. Biologists refer to this as a cascading system shutdown.
That sounds ominous.
It is. Let's introduce an environmental toxin to our salmon's river. Suppose runoff from an old mine introduces dissolved copper into the water.
Okay, so the water is polluted.
Right. Now, we know the gills pull in vital ions and oxygen using microscopic structures called transport proteins. Think of a transport protein as a highly specific biological turnstile embedded in the cell membrane. It requires a specific molecular key to turn.
And the copper acts like superglue jammed into the keyhole.
Yes. It alters the physical shape of the transport protein. The turnstile locks. The cellular membrane of the gill can no longer actively transport oxygen or excrete ammonia.
So that's a microscopic failure at the cellular subsystem level.
Exactly. But because the hierarchy is entirely interdependent, the failure cascades. The blood drops in oxygen concentration.
So the heart is affected.
Yes. The heart muscle tissue, deprived of fuel, begins to necrotize and fail. The circulatory system collapses, leading to systemic organ failure and finally the death of the entire organism.
Wow.
One damaged protein type brings down the entire macrostructure.
That highlights how fragile the balance really is. And wildlife biologists are actually tracking these interconnected systems in real time now.
They are, with the moose, right?
Yes, the Alaskan moose. Researchers need to understand how moose handle heat stress as ambient summer temperatures rise, because a moose is heavily insulated for winter.
It's wearing a thick winter coat in July.
Exactly. So they collar them with GPS trackers, And get this, they get them to swallow internal rumen sensors.
Which is just incredible technology. The rumen is the primary fermentation chamber of the moose's digestive system.
Right.
And digestion in herbivores relies on gut bacteria breaking down complex plant matter, which generates a massive amount of internal thermal energy.
So the moose is essentially carrying a furnace inside its stomach while walking around in the summer heat.
Literally.
And the rumen sensors track those internal temperature spikes, while the GPS tracks the moose's behavior. Researchers can actually watch the data as the digestive system overheats, triggering the nervous system to alter the behavioral system.
Right, forcing the moose to take action.
Exactly. It stops eating, finds dense shade, or wades up to its neck in a freezing river just to dump that internal heat.
But to run that kind of dynamic behavioral response, the organism requires continuous high-fidelity data. I mean, it has to know precisely what is happening outside its biological boundaries.
It needs sensors.
Right, which brings us to information processing. This is entirely reliant on specialized structures known as sensory receptors.
Okay, explain receptors.
So a sensory receptor is, functionally, a biological transducer. Its sole purpose is to detect a specific environmental stimulus like electromagnetic radiation, mechanical pressure, or thermal energy, and convert that physical phenomena into an electrical impulse that the nervous system can transmit.
And then the brain either triggers an immediate behavioral response or it stores that electrical pattern as a memory for future survival.
Exactly.
The structural adaptations for this are just mind-blowing. Let's look at thermoreceptors. The Alaskan wood frog actually freezes solid during the winter.
It's wild.
Its heart completely stops beating. It stops breathing.
Which, sounds like death, but it is actually a highly orchestrated chemical defense mechanism.
Right, but how does the frog's internal chemistry know when to execute that defense?
The thermoreceptors.
Exactly. As the autumn air drops below freezing, thermoreceptors in the frog's outer skin detect the drop in thermal energy. They convert that temperature drop into an electrical signal that fires along the peripheral nerves to the brain.
And then the brain takes over.
Yep. The brain shoots a chemical command down to the liver, triggering it to suddenly dump massive quantities of glucose into the bloodstream.
Sugar.
Yep. And that glucose acts as a biological antifreeze, a cryoprotectant. It packs into the cells, lowering the freezing point of the internal water, so the jagged ice crystals we talked about earlier don't form and shred the cell membranes.
It is such an elegant cascade. I mean, physical temperature change transduced into electrical data, resulting in a systemic chemical defense.
It's beautiful.
It really is. And we see an equally staggering level of precision with chemoreceptors. When adult Pacific salmon migrate thousands of miles from the open ocean back to spawn, they don't just wander randomly.
No, they know exactly where they're going.
They utilize olfactory cues.
They literally smell their way home through the ocean.
They do. Their olfactory receptors feature these complex, three-dimensional molecular pockets. And these pockets are shaped to bind only with specific dissolved amino acids and minerals unique to the exact natal stream where they hatched years prior.
So it's like a memory of their childhood river.
Yes. It is a lock-and-key mechanism. When the correct river molecule drifts into the receptor, it binds, the protein changes shape, and an ion channel opens to fire an electrical signal to the brain. They decode a chemical trail measured in parts per trillion.
That's unbelievable. And then you have mechanoreceptors, which convert physical motion into electrical data.
Right, touch and pressure.
Yeah. If you look at coastal fish navigating a tide pool, they have this structure running down their flanks called a lateral line. It is a canal filled with fluid and microscopic hair-like structures called cilia.
So sensitive to movement.
Right. When another fish swims nearby, it pushes a pressure wave through the water. That wave hits the lateral line and physically bends the cilia.
And this is where the micromechanics are so elegant. The bending of those cilia pulls on tiny structural filaments that yank open ion channels on the nerve cell membrane.
Remember those biological turnstiles?
Exactly. When the channel pops open, positively charged ions from the surrounding fluid rush into the negatively charged cell. That sudden reversal of electrical charge is the electrical spark. It travels up the nerve to the brain.
So it's translating a wave into electricity.
Yes. The fish literally feels the precise location and speed of a predator moving through pitch-black water, all from the mechanical bending of microscopic hairs.
That's incredible.
And harbor seals utilize the exact same mechanoreceptor principles with their whiskers to track the hydrodynamic wake of fleeing prey.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because when we talk about processing these senses, there is a fundamental misconception about how we interact with the world.
Oh, absolutely.
Let's put ourselves in the environment. If I am wading through an Alaskan tide pool and I accidentally step barefoot on a razor-sharp barnacle, I immediately feel a sharp pain in my foot. The structural damage is in my foot. The pain is in my foot.
Well, it certainly feels that way, but the pain is not in your foot. In fact, no sensation actually exists at the site of the receptor.
Wait, what? So my foot is completely numb to the reality of the barnacle.
Your foot is merely the site of transduction. When the skin breaks, mechanoreceptors and nociceptors, which are pain receptors, detect the tissue damage. They generate an electrical impulse.
Okay.
That impulse travels up the sciatic nerve in your leg, enters the spinal cord, and shoots up to the somatosensory cortex of your brain. The brain is the central processing unit.
So the brain does the feeling.
Yes. It receives that raw electrical data, analyzes it, and chemically constructs the conscious sensation we call pain.
Mind blown.
And it doesn't stop there. The brain then maps that sensation onto its internal three-dimensional mental model of your body, projecting the feeling back to the location of your foot.
Okay, so the foot is just the tripped wire on the perimeter fence. The brain is the security control room that actually sounds the alarm and flashes the red lights.
That is the perfect way to visualize it. And the most striking medical proof of this mechanism is the phantom limb phenomenon.
Oh, right, where amputees feel pain in a missing limb.
Exactly. Patients who have undergone the amputation of an arm or a leg frequently report feeling intense, highly specific pain in the limb that was removed.
Even though the limb isn't there anymore.
Because the severed sensory nerves that used to span down the leg are still present at the stump. More importantly, the neural map of that leg is still fully active in the brain's cortex.
Wow.
If those severed nerve endings misfire and send spontaneous electrical signals up the spinal cord, the brain processes the data exactly as it always has. It creates the sensation of pain and projects it into a physical space where the foot used to be. The brain is the absolute sole interpreter of reality.
But wait, that introduces a massive logistical problem for a biological machine.
What do you mean?
Well, if every single piece of sensory data, like every touch, every temperature change, every sharp rock, has to travel all the way from the perimeter wire, up the spinal cord, into the brain, be chemically processed, analyzed, and then a motor command has to be generated and sent all the way back down to the muscle. Doesn't that take too long?
The latency issue.
Right. If I trip and put my hand on a burning hot camp stove, I physically yank my hand back before I even consciously realize the metal is hot. If I had to wait for my brain's central processing unit to map the pain and make a decision, the tissue damage would be catastrophic.
This raises such an important question about the speed of survival. Because the electrical signals traveling along your nerves are fast, yes, but biological processing takes milliseconds.
And milliseconds matter.
In a survival situation, milliseconds mean the difference between life and severe tissue necrosis. So evolution solved this latency problem with a structural shortcut called a reflex arc.
A closed-loop system.
Precisely. In a reflex arc, when the thermal receptors in your hand detect the extreme heat of the stove, they fire an intense electrical impulse. That signal races up the nerve to the spinal cord.
But it doesn't go to the brain.
No. Instead of routing that signal up the ascending tracks to the conscious brain for analysis, the spinal cord utilizes an interneuron. It's like a tiny neural bridge.
Okay.
It instantly transfers the signal directly to a motor neuron right there in the spinal cord.
It bypasses the brain entirely. The perimeter guard just fires the defense weapons without calling the general.
It prioritizes speed over conscious thought. That motor neuron shoots a command straight back down your arm, forcing your bicep to contract and violently pull your hand away from the heat source.
So the brain is just left out of the loop.
Well, the entire loop happens at the level of the spinal cord. Now, a fraction of a second later, a secondary signal does reach your brain's cortex.
Got it.
Which is why you only feel the agonizing pain and realize what just happened after your hand is already hovering safely in the air.
It's an emergency override built into the wiring. The structure dictates the function, and the function ensures survival.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean for someone exploring the life sciences? I mean, when we take a step back from the specific math of cell membranes, the internal trackers in a moose, or the neurobiology of a reflex arc, a profound narrative emerges about how nature actually operates.
Survival is not magic. It is mechanics.
Right. It requires a relentless utilization of energy, exchange of matter, and processing of information. From the rigid cellulose walls preventing a lichen from shattering in the frost, to the hierarchical communication of a salmon's nervous and circulatory systems fighting a river current.
And if any one of those subsystems fails, the entire biological enterprise risks collapse.
It is a continuous, frantic, beautiful communication among parts. So here is a final provocative thought for you to take with you today.
Yeah.
The next time you look out your window or take a walk through your neighborhood, don't just passively observe a bird in a tree or a squirrel darting across the grass.
Look deeper.
Try to spot the invisible mechanics. Imagine the millions of microscopic cell boundaries furiously regulating water pressure. Picture the ion channels popping open, the electrical signals shooting up a spinal cord to trigger a split-second muscle reflex, and the complex internal organ systems working in perfect, desperately calibrated harmony.
All of it happening just to keep that local wildlife alive for one more day.
It forces you to respect the complexity of the natural world on a completely different level.
It really does. It's breathtaking when you think about it.
It truly is. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of the biological machine. In MS-LS1, students learn that life is not just one thing. Life is a system of parts working together.